What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Pick Six Podcast. Will Brinson, joined by Brady, Quinn, and Lee Douzable. We've got a like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's final NFL roster cut day. We're down to the 53. The NFL, I guess it depends on. Actually, I'd be curious from a player perspective, because from a short, middle-aged media perspective, a single day of roster cuts is vastly preferred, gentlemen. From a player perspective, what's the better option there? Do you want multiple days so you can try it? You know if you made it down. Okay, they changed it obviously to where it's just that single cut now. It used to be they used to do like the final day was on a Saturday, week 4 of the preseason, and now it's Tuesday. Probably because the NFL wants eyeballs, but it is helpful to have it one day a year. From a player's perspective, though, better or worse?
I think it's better, honestly, and Brady can speak to this, especially as a veteran player, right? Because you talked about it, Will. When there was 4 preseason games, there was kind of a gradual cut. It would be, I think, a cut to 85, then a cut to 80, and then you cut to 53, right? But in totality, if you look at this thing, right, that last preseason game, most frontline guys aren't playing. Right. So if you're a guy fighting on a roster, like, you're playing all offensive defense, you're playing all special teams with no break. Nobody's coming to help you out. So to me, it never made sense because there were guys that teams were depending on in that last preseason game that would get hurt because they were out there because they couldn't rest them because they didn't have the numbers to rest guys. So it always made sense for me to always carry 90 all the way through. That way, you also give guys an extra opportunity to put game film out there if they don't make the 53-man roster. Because like they always say, there's 31 other teams watching this film, right? So I love that they changed that rule and made it 90 all the way through to the end of cuts. Because, again, why would you want to put some guy that you're going to depend on at risk that last preseason game if you don't have to?
Yeah, I guess I look at it a little bit different because I think you're talking about two different things. Like, for example, having an additional preseason game like they used to have with the old week 4 preseason game, it was a lot of those back into the roster guys.
Correct.
And one of the reasons why those guys tend to play the bulk of those plays was because the starters actually played back then. You play a little game 2, game 3 as well, and then you probably sit out that final preseason game. In this case, though, now we've cut down to 3, and on top of that, we very rarely see starters play anywhere close to a big portion or share of the preseason game. So I actually what I liked about having the 2 wave of cuts was I think it's one a little softer for the guys who had no shot. They just kind of move on from, let them go try to find potentially a spot somewhere else. Or it allowed, if you were a veteran guy, to be able to have that kind of forced cut where you could potentially go quickly to another team for either that, that 4th preseason game. So you had a shot to get on tape and be with them for maybe a week before that was done. Now, when you only leave it to 1 cut, it kind of puts the team more in control of when they're going to release you. And if you talk to some general managers, I was talking to Rick Spielman earlier today about this, for those veteran guys, usually he'd say, hey, if we knew we were going to keep the guy, we'd try to release him a little bit early. But now you're really putting it into their hands, and they're kind of controlling when that happens. So I'm never one where you want to have team control. I think you'd like to be able to, as a player, force them to release you so you have another opportunity to play somewhere else, maybe the last preseason game. That's why I didn't necessarily mind the 2 cuts. I think it gave some of the power back to the players in having it this way. And I also think it gave a little bit of like a break in between this massive wave of players who are released. And in some cases, players who might be released, might not. Maybe they're trying to trade him last second. We see news of that sometimes where like Albert O, the tight end in Denver, was going to be released and they figured out a trade partner at the last second, right? Those sorts of things, it's not as hectic and it's not as chaotic because you've got it spread out over 2 cuts. So I actually like the 2 cut a little more from the player empowerment standpoint than I do the 1 cut. But I understand, like, especially in a world of 4 preseason games, it makes a ton of sense. But now in a world of 3, maybe 2, like the starters aren't really playing anyway.
Dude, you mentioned something else just to sort of touch on it from an overarching macro standpoint too, how teams are kind of stashing these, like sort of like the gamesmanship of the NFL roster and putting, some of the, like these UDFA guys or undrafted free agents, UDFAs, that you might otherwise try to get into your practice squad, putting them on your 53-man roster letting all the rosters get sorted out because we have 2 weeks. It used to be the Saturday before the first game of the season, your roster was set. You now have like some time where you can do roster manipulation, right?
I mean, but rosters, and Brady will speak to this too. The rosters won't be final until probably that Wednesday before kickoff, to be honest with you, because the waiver wire, right? People are going to get
week one opening day roster, especially for some of those veterans who are on that kind of vet minimum deal or back towards the back and when they sign those, because if they stay on, if they make that week one game day roster, guaranteed for the rest of the season. So you could even make the case up to like late Saturday night, Sunday morning, the injury situation of week one. You're sweating the movement, 100%, 100%. You're sweating.
Because I've been there before, and I think the rule is that Saturday night, Brady, if I'm not mistaken. If you're on that roster, then you're set for the year. And what you'll see is a lot of veterans released right now, and you'll see a wave of free agency week 2 going into the season because of what Brady spoke about, right? Your money's not guaranteed if you're a vested veteran if you're not on opening day roster. So a lot of teams, what they'll do, like you said, Will, some gamesmanship. They'll cut veterans that are vested and bring them in week 2, which I think is a terrible thing, obviously. But what we were talking about before, like teams trying to stash young players on their roster. You see, I mean, even the Jets are doing it right now, right? They cut their punter, Thomas Morstead. They're going to definitely bring him back. But they got, a couple undrafted free agent rookie receivers that they're nervous about putting out there on waivers and getting claimed by somebody else. So these kids are probably thinking, I made the roster. No, like Brady said, wait till Saturday night. That's when you start to feel a little bit more comfortable that you made the roster, because you can still get cut all the way up until game day. I've seen it. I've been on teams where guys literally got cut on that Friday, 2 days before game day, thinking they were going to be on the 53-man roster. And also the waiver wire plays a role in this, right? Teams are going to put claims in for guys. And if they're rewarded guys, you can't have 56 guys on your active roster, right? So if you claim 3 guys and rewarded 3 guys have to go. So again, this is just the beginning of it. There's always a little gamesmanship and tinkering with the roster. Again, I said the Jets, they cut their punter. They definitely need a punter for the season. Thomas Morstead's going to be their guy. But it was so they could keep, 3 of those rookie receivers on the roster.
On that note, by the way, I was just going to ask Will, like, why would you draft a kicker punter? I mean, I feel like every time we come around to, and I'm not trying to be overly critical on the teams that do, or just the position itself, but we go through like a training camp preseason. We see so many teams cut a guy that they drafted, or they drafted the year prior that was like iffy coming into camp. That's like, dude, why not just just sign a free agent and go make these guys earn it? Like, I never understand that. That's like that's the one kind of position group, either kicker, punter, that you look at and just go, we come around to cut day, and those are the guys more often than not they get drafted that you end up seeing them like move on from them relatively fast
after 1 year. Yep.
Sometimes even after that preseason, it's like, all right, they drafted them 6th, 7th round. They're going to go ahead and release them. And
there's also a lot of variation when it comes to, especially with kickers, where it's not like sometimes you have a new holder. Sometimes you end up playing in games where there's a bunch of wind. Sometimes you have a bunch of outdoor games late in the season just because the schedule is funky. Sometimes the ball hits the upright and it goes right, and sometimes it goes left. And you end up making bad points. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict. And that's why, like, the more heavily you invest in those guys, the more it gets criticized and the bigger deal it becomes. One notable positive from roster cut days, at least for right now, Damar Hamlin made the Bills 53-man roster. Be pretty. Surely they're not going to cut him between now and next Saturday, right?
He's already won comeback player of the year for sure.
See, it's weird though. He's minus 285, but it hasn't moved that much. And like, what if John Minchie goes for 1,000 yards?
That's another name. That's right. Yeah.
Like Damar, I mean.
Look,
he's a third safety, so he's probably going to play some.
Yeah, he's a core special teamer. I think he's backup or mixed in kind of second, third safety. So, I wonder if he ever is like, man, this is awesome, the support I've gotten, but like, I just want to get back to football. Get back to football. Yeah. Like, I don't want to be known as like that guy. Like, I'd want to make my legacy on the football field, not with what happened on the football field. So I always wondered that when like people become super famous for something, like at some point, do they want to move on from that? Especially when it's like a kind of a scary event like that.
Right. I was going to make a joke about being a podcast host, but it probably won't land. So instead, I'll move on to yeah, exactly. See, wasn't going to land to Trey Lance and the Dallas Cowboys. Trey Lance traded to the Dallas Cowboys. We talk about all the changes that we've seen with the roster, roster setup and how the 49ers had to play Josh Johnson and then like almost Christian McCaffrey, a quarterback last year. Yeah. What did you think, Brady? Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you guys, like, what surprised you more? That he ended up like the 49ers moved on from him like this quick, given the small sample size he got to play. Were you surprised by the compensation that the 49ers got in exchange for Trey Lance? Or were you more surprised it was the Dallas Cowboys, who were like the team that decided to trade? I'm just curious, which one of those three do you guys kind of say ding, 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 it's that one?
I'll go first. With Jerry Jones, nothing surprises me anymore. Honestly, it's Jerry's world. He does what he wants to do. He doesn't answer to anybody. I mean, Brady, this guy came out, I think today or yesterday, and was like, Jalen Hurts had fell in the draft. I was going to take him. I mean, that lets you know how Jerry Jones thinks. So anything he does doesn't surprise me. Actually, and you might be surprised, my biggest surprise was that they were able to actually get a 4th-round pick for him. I thought it was going to be a 6th, 7th-round pick because, again, you talked about the sample size, hasn't played that much. He already had, deficiency issues going into the draft, right? There was a lot of work he was going to have to do. A lot of groundwork was going to have to be laid for him to be an elite quarterback in the NFL. He didn't play at all really that much at North Dakota State. So he didn't have a lot of experience. So I'm not surprised they moved on from him fast. I mean, if you look at the Shanahan tree and what they've done with other quarterbacks, they move on and they keep it pushing, right? They believe in their system, that West Coast offense, Shanahan offense. They believe that they can put somebody in and they can play at a high level if they live within the system. I think that's what they found with Brock Purdy. So kudos to them for realizing. I'm not gonna say it was a bad pick because, again, like you said, Brady, we haven't really seen much of Trey Lance, so it's hard to gauge could he actually have been a really good quarterback in the NFL. But they felt like they got their quarterback of the future in Brock Purdy, and they got him in the last pick of the draft. And for 7 games plus, 2 playoff games, they felt like they got their guy, so they were willing to move on. So I think them getting the 4th-round pick, to me, was more surprising than anything because I honestly thought Trey Lance was going to go for like a 6th or 7th-round pick.
See, I would say that the most surprising thing was how quickly they moved on because now their depth chart is, as it stands right now after the cuts are done, Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, Brandon Allen.
Yep.
Like that's cool if you trust Brock Purdy to stay healthy after his surgery and him to be the same guy he was for those 7 games. And if you believe that Sam Darnold can bounce back in the system, and if you think if it all goes to bleep, Brandon Allen can be your Hail Mary hero, but like you had time to deal with Trey Lance and just see like what if Brock Purdy tore his like UCL injury? I get you don't want the specter of Trey Lance looming, and I think you kind of wanted to help Trey Lance out by giving him an opportunity. I'm not really surprised by the fact that it was the Cowboys because I think the comment you're referencing, Deuce, where Jerry mentioned Jalen Hurts and then where he pointed out how Trey Lance, he's like, it had nothing to do with Dak. Dak has them leveraged up because of the cap hit. They're going to have to restructure him. And now they can be like, Jerry is trying to play that public game where he's like, yeah, well, basically, we like anybody out there, like Jalen Hurts. Oh, God, we almost drafted Brock Purdy 6 times. And, he'd be throwing any kinds of names out. You tried to trade for Trey Lance. 4th-round pick, I would have, I don't know. I just thought that they should have moved on faster. Brady, do you think that there's anything here that indicates like how quickly they moved on? Is there anything that might indicate, given the comments from John Lynch, that John Lynch was the one pushing for Trey Lance and that Kyle Shanahan now has maybe a little bit of more power in terms of that personnel say in that infrastructure there, just because it was almost like John Lynch was like, we just wanted to find him a good home for a 4th-round pick. And to me, it was just a very odd statement.
Yeah, look, I feel like Kyle Shanahan has always had the power in that between those two in that organization. I mean, ultimately, it wasn't like they hired John Lynch first. That was facilitated through Kyle Shanahan's relationship with John Lynch back from the time he was a ball boy with the Broncos. So
Kyle picked John Lynch. I'm just saying, like,
correct. So I think that conversation kind of ends there in regards to like who has the power. And from what I remember and recall when, Jimmy Garoppolo first got there, it was Kyle Shanahan wanted Jimmy Garoppolo to play. John Lynch was under the impression that they could just go pay him because remember, they were going into an offseason where they were going to have to make a decision on Jimmy Garoppolo. And
I was actually there, Brady. So
there you go.
The intention was to trade Garoppolo the next year. If you read into it, like Kyle was high on Kirk Cousins. He wanted Kirk Cousins to come and play in that offense because
But
Kirk was going to be free the next year.
This is once the season happened, though.
Right? Oh, okay.
So my conversation with him was like, hey, I bought into him, and then he got there, but like they were like, we can't just like let him sit there and then figure things out in the offseason. Like he wanted to see him, he wanted to play.
Talking about for those last 6 games and 7.
The last 5 games when they went 5-0.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it was pretty evident that it was like, well, if Kyle wants him to play, he's going to play. He's got to showcase what he's capable of. So, the rest is kind of history, obviously, because they signed him to the long-term contract after that. And you just kind of get the sense that the draft pick in and of itself of taking Trey Lance, and that's why I've always said and will stand by the fact that I think they traded up to be able to give Green Bay what they were looking for in that draft. It wasn't for, San Francisco. And I think Green Bay pulled out of that deal. San Francisco got caught being in that position. And I think they all knew what was going on. And so they did what they thought was best, take the guy who might have the most upside. Didn't work out between injuries and everything else. And fortunately, they fell into Brock Purdy. And they got Sam Darnold as a backup now with Brandon Allen being there. So they feel good with where they're at. And I think it probably has as much to do with the 49ers feeling like they can win a Super Bowl right now and not wanting to be more patient with Trey Lance on the roster and saying like, we've got Purdy, we feel good about him if he's healthy. And if he's not there, we got a former, first-round pick, high first-round pick, and Sam Darnold's got experience that's played really well for us. So it's not so much even an indictment on Trey Lance. It's just like, hey, man, we knew he was going to be a project. We got too many studs. Like we got Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel and Trent Williams and Nick Bosa and all these guys. That's like, we've got to put ourselves in a position to win now. And if we can get rid of some of his contract, not pick up the 5th-year option or worry about anything else like an extension, work through Brock Purdy's rookie deal. Sam Darnold's on an economical deal. We could build this roster with some of these stars around that quarterback position, and that might give us the best chance to win a Super Bowl. So, like, as much as it could be about Trey Lance, it also can just be about the scenario that the 49ers are in right now, and they feel comfortable moving forward with what they have. This is always a fun deal where yeah.
I didn't do that. Buy or sell. I disappeared. I didn't know what
We're
happened.
like, me and Brady were like, we don't want to.
We're watching your mouth move and nothing's coming out. We're like, all right, is it
I
my
disappeared. Buy or sell that Dak believes all that. Did you hear any of that quote?
We didn't hear any of that.
Ah. Weird.
That's what we were referring to.
Dak Prescott said something about Trey Lance, a big thing. We embrace him. I'm not surprised anymore. Buy or sell that Dak Prescott isn't mad about dudes. Buy or sell that Dak Prescott isn't mad about the Trey Lance trade.
I don't think he's mad. I think he's more annoyed than anything. We were talking about Jerry Jones earlier, and I think this was just some gamesmanship. You talked about it, Will. He's got a ridiculous cap number next year. I think it's near $60 million.
Yep.
And Brady and Will honestly think this is a massive year for Dak Prescott. I would not be surprised if the Dallas Cowboys don't probably win a game in the playoffs and win a divisional game in the playoffs. He could potentially be traded next year. I honestly could see that because if you're Jerry Jones, right, you look at the rest of the roster, it's championship ready, right? When you look at the defense, right? When you look at the O-line when it's healthy, right? And Zach Martin back in the fold. Like, you feel like you have championship type receivers, championship secondary. The one caveat and question mark is Dak Prescott. Let's not forget this guy had 7 straight games to close out the year with an interception. 2 pivotal interceptions in a divisional round in a defensive battle versus San Francisco 49ers. That cost them that game. So this is a massive year. And if you look at the history of Dak, he usually doesn't turn the ball over like that. But what worries me is that he's talked about it all offseason. So you know it's in the back of his mind. right? So I think this is a massive season. I think this was gamesmanship by Jerry Jones, not telling him, that they're trading for Trey Lance. Not that Trey Lance is a real threat to him, but then also bringing up the Jalen Hurts thing. Like, what was the purpose of Jerry Jones bringing that up? Right? I think it's a message to Dak Prescott.
It's
You
just
said old age.
Old age. Like, he's become one of those like old dudes who like,
They say whatever they want.
why Grandpa say that? Like, why would he say that? Like, what's Grandpa doing? I don't need to know that.
Exactly.
I think he's just tired of it, honestly. I think he's tired of it. And I would say I'd make the case this year when you get paid and get the contract Dak Prescott did, and you're the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, every year is a big year for you. Like, you've got to prove yourself every single year and justify what you're being compensated. And I look at I honestly look at his contract and say, everyone is going to like try to make this feel like, oh, it's about Trey Lance, and leverage maybe for the Cowboys standpoint of things, depending on how things go. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think they see a guy who has a similar skill set as Dak Prescott. Like, I remember when Trey was coming out, I was like, oh, he runs like Dak Prescott. Like, that's exactly how Dak looked to me at Mississippi State. Right. Like, he had like those like high knees, and he's just the kind of build he had and all that. And look, like going back to like watching like tape, like the type of, throws and some of the inconsistencies that you saw, it was probably why Dak got drafted in the 4th round. And it was, when with Trey Lance, somehow it evolved into like, look at all this upside. And you're like, well, hold on. He's not that really accurate all the time. Yeah. Anyway, my point is I do think the Cowboys feel like they've got a great roster, and they do. And I think they feel like with this NFC, they've got a shot to make a run. And if they do make a run, or if Dak gets hurt, you better have an insurance policy. And it's no disrespect to Cooper Rush. People made a really big deal about like what 2 good games.
That was weird. It was like 5, Brady.
But no, he did not play well for 5. They carried him for about 2 or 3 of those. He played good in 1 or 2. But like everyone exploded like, oh, feel the rush. Cooper Rush. It was like, all right, let's just calm down now. I think that now they've got a legitimately talented guy who they look at and say, if Dak gets hurt, we feel like we could put him in there. We could put him in a position to succeed. And he could sit and watch and learn. And he doesn't have to feel the pressure of being the guy they traded all his picks for, number 3 overall. He's just a guy now sitting behind Dak waiting for that next opportunity. So I think it has more to do with that. Because, again, you look at the Dak Prescott's contract, he's going to have to be restructured after this year anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a huge cap hit in 2024. It's about $60 million. So regardless of, like, if he plays good, he plays bad, like, they're going to have to restructure his contract. And he's still got some, voidable years attached. Some kind of like the back end of that is spread it out. So I don't think he's even tradable. Like, I don't think he's cuttable because the dead cap hit. And I don't know that he's tradable either, because anyone who trades for him is going to have to, restructure that deal. So I think he's their quarterback for the next 2 years. Yep. And I think after that, it becomes more palatable to make a cut if you need to, or even have him be traded. And it's more about like where Dallas sees themselves in the hierarchy of the NFC, where you got Philly, San Fran, and maybe Dallas. Maybe Dallas is that next team right there as far as the playoff hunt to go to the Super Bowl.
Hey, let's not forget that old Mike McCarthy, hey, man, he spent a summer learning the read option after he got his pants pulled down by San Francisco a couple times in the playoffs. Right. So maybe he's able to implement a read option scheme with Trey Lance. But there'll be a fun contract situation with Dak coming up in the future. Who doesn't love that? It's at least more interesting than running back contracts. We got 2 situations. We got 2 of them we got to talk about. We'll do that coming up next after the break.
Jump into this week's unforgettable moments, electrifying action, and pure football passion with the Inside College Football Team on CBS Sports Network.
Jonathan Taylor, welcome back to the Pick Six Podcast. Will Brinson, Brady, Quinn, Douzable. Jonathan Taylor, not traded. In fact, he's going on the he's on the PUP list.
The PUP list. So he's out till week 4.
So he is going to miss 4 games. I mean, quite simply, Brady, how do we get here?
Jim Irsay? I mean,
no disrespect here, the honky-tonk man.
Look, this is what I just had an argument with Pete Prisco about. And he's like, well, there's no running back market. What do you mean? If the Colts offered him an extension, he'd take it. I'm like, no, I don't know that he would. Like, first off, like Pete's the type that portrays this unrealistic scenario, like a 5-year extension for $14 million a year. I was like, yeah, Pete, go out and say that he would sign that. Meanwhile, it's not even realistic. Like, my whole point is, if you look at Saquon and the Giants, if you look at Josh Jacobs and the Raiders, In both cases, both players, not exclusive franchise tag, they essentially tried to use whatever leverage they had and speak up about how frustrated they were with the running back market.
Did a Zoom call.
All that, right? Yeah, the Zoom call. The whole running back market did. But the truth of the matter is they were able to make up and be incentivized to come back and play for the team. I do think Jonathan Taylor would have done that had Jim Irsay not basically said, like, yeah, I don't care if you're in the NFL or not.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pretty damning thing to hear
He
from
made it really personal.
And that's all I'm saying is, like, look, all football players, like, as much as, you know, we'll sign a deal that an owner gives us and all that, we also want to feel appreciated. Cool. And if you get an owner that's just basically sitting there saying, like, as good as you've been, I don't care if you're on our team or not. Like, and by the way, not only do I not care, it's my opinion that no one else cares is really what he said. That's a pretty damning thing to have an owner say that. And I look at it and say, had he not said that, yeah, maybe Jonathan Taylor eventually comes back once he's healthy. Maybe the ankle injury is worse than we thought. And probably plays and hopes they can work things out next offseason. But because of how Jim Irsay handled this, I think he really put Jonathan Taylor in a tough spot of wanting to try to come back for a guy that just really doesn't give a crap about you. And by the way, he's already said no to you once for an extension. Why would you want to waste any more time to try to play for a guy like that when you know there's not a payday on the other side?
Yeah. I look
at
it
I was
like
like, I got yelled at by Colts fans. It was like the Colts lowballed him. They're like, they didn't lowball him. They never made an offer, idiot. I was like, that's worse than a lowball. Like, you didn't make a single offer. That's a slap in the face.
Come walk through my house. It's for sale. Tell me how much you love it or don't love it, and then just not even make an offer. But like, it just
people do it all the time, Brady. People do it all the time. But I look at it like this, right? And Brady, I think you broke that down beautifully. If they, and I suggested this too, I think with a new system coming in with Shane Steichen, if they just would have gave him like a sweetener this year and then maybe reassess this after this year as far as an extension, once you see how Jonathan Taylor fits into the scheme, I think both parties would have been able to come to an agreement, right? I said this. Austin Eckler did it with the LA Chargers, right? They gave him a 1-year sweetener, right? Just to, make him a little bit happy because we know that he was a touchdown machine in the red zone last year. He didn't have the rushing numbers, but he had the receptions and he always finished in the end zone. I thought that was something that the Colts and Jim Irsay could potentially work out. But again, when you talk about saying, if I'm, no longer here and you're no longer in football, the game moves on. Like, as players, yeah, you take it it's a business, but you take that personally, right? Because you're literally putting yourself in harm's way each play to go out there and play for your organization. So the running back market is what it is. Like, there was rumors supposedly he wanted up to $14 million a year. That was never going to happen, right? But I thought if the Colts just maybe gave him a sweetener this year, they could have rectified it. But what I said the whole time was I felt like Jonathan Taylor wasn't going anywhere. I mean, I think Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard were pretty upfront saying that something was probably most likely going to have to blow them away to make a trade, right, as far as compensation. Supposedly the Miami Dolphins actually made a pretty good offer, but it wasn't enough for them. So I always thought he was going to be an Indianapolis coach. Now, the thing that is concerning is that he stays on a PUP list, right? And now he's going to miss the first 4 games of the season. So you being on a PUP list, Jonathan Taylor, it doesn't really help you in the future in regards to getting a new deal, right? Because you're already coming off the ankle injury. You missed 6 games last year. Now, if they don't franchise tag you next year, which they still can do, if a team wants to pay you, they're going to probably lowball you because you're coming off that ankle injury and you didn't even play the first 4 games of the season. And who knows, Brady, maybe he uses his ankle thing as an issue going forward and decides to sit out even more games. But yeah, I would advise against that just because, again, it's not like you're going to gain any more leverage by not playing this year. You're not going to get a bigger contract next year. I think you go out there and play. And then if you look at the history of Shane Steichen and his offense, running backs have had career years. Look at what Miles Sanders did last year. He had over 1,300 yards, right, rushing in this Shane Steichen offense. So you got Anthony Richardson in the backfield for you. I think that opens the game up for you as far as running downhill. Holes will be there. Lanes will be there because linebackers and defensive ends, they have to respect Anthony Richardson keeping the ball in that RPO in the zone read game. So
yeah, I do wonder if some of this has to do with maybe waiting 4 weeks in the season. Yeah. You got 13 games left, and a team's just like, hey, we got an injury, or maybe we were interested. Now we're really interested because we need a player of his caliber.
Yeah.
Because I mean, he's still getting paid.
He will still be paid being on the PUP list.
Yeah, it's not like he's not getting paid.
Yeah,
and you put him on IR now. It's different. In a rookie contract, he could have an injury split, right? Being on IR, so
that's tough.
Completely different situation there. Whereas if he's on the PUP, like the deal could be sweetened from the Dolphins, where they're like, we got into the season, we're not liking where things are at. Maybe Tua gets banged up. Who knows how long he's going to be out? We feel like we got a good roster. We need to, bring in Jonathan Taylor to help give us a little boost and take some pressure off, Mike White as our backup, or Skylar Thompson, whoever's our backup. And so that might make some sense there. But that's what I think maybe is happening.
Or maybe the Colts start 0-4 and they're like, all right, screw it, we'll put you on IR.
Right.
And
that's what I'm saying. If I was advising him, and it seems like his agent has handled this awfully as well too.
Yeah.
Right. If like when it was 3:00, Brady, I would have been on the phone with my agent like, all right, if we don't get traded, we need to go back to them and tell them, I'm healthy. Let me go do a physical so I won't be on the PUP to start the year. Because
is it the worst thing?
I feel like PUP is the best.
I think it's the worst thing
scenario. He gets paid and he doesn't have to play 4 more games.
But does that help him in the long run? As far
I don't think it hurts him.
I
don't think it hurts him.
I think what the PUP list move is by the Colts. This would be my guess by Chris Ballard. Chris Ballard basically sort of told Jim Irsay, like, look, we want to try and make men fences at all. Like, let's not put them on do not report. Let's put them on the PUP list. And you put them on the PUP list, and then you say, Jonathan, you're getting 4 games of free money on your biggest salary, $4.3 million for your base salary of your career. This is going to be that's 4. So I don't even know what his per game is, but you get the point.
$4 million over 13 games.
Yeah.
Well, he still gets his base over the first 4 weeks, right? So
correct.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I'm saying he's really being paid the $4 million over 13 games.
Correct.
Right, so exactly. So
if he gets activated off the PUP.
No, he's getting paid regardless.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
13 games. But
the most he's going to play, at least as of what we know right now, is 13 games.
13
so he was making $250-some thousand per game over the 17 games. If he put, now he's getting $330,769 over the 13 games. So he basically got however the hell that math works out. He got a big pay bump per game. And by virtue of I think this is the Colts kind of throwing him a bone and saying, hey, look, let's try to mend fences maybe and see if we can work this out. Plus, you see where you are after 4 games, and maybe, as Brady points out, maybe you try to trade him. But yeah, this is certainly not the end of this, but it should get him at least kind of ease it, I guess. I don't know. Josh Jacobs signed a 1-year deal this weekend. Dudes, is that the best move for Jacobs? I mean, he basically got a sweetener, right? Just like Austin Eckler. Saquon.
I thought this was amazing by Josh Jacobs, right? A lot of people assumed that he was going to show up right before the season, right? But
friend of the podcast, Josh Jacobs, by the way.
Yeah, be able to get almost $2 million more when Saquon essentially signed this same franchise tag, because there's no way he's hitting those incentives. They're ridiculous. I don't think Saquon even gets close to those incentives. But actually drafted Josh Jacobs because they gave him this sweetener, which lets you know they're probably going to use him a lot like they did last year, right? I thought this was masterful by him, not being able to put all that wear and tear on your body during training camp and showing up, and to get this sweetener right before the season. And Brady, we know this for veterans. If you get 2 solid weeks of practice, you'll probably hit the ground running when the season starts. So he came in right on time. He'll get 2 weeks of work without getting the wear and tear on his body. And I think he's going to have another monster day. I know, Jimmy Garoppolo's there, but I think they're still going to run the ball. They still got Devontae Adams there. We'll see what happens, at the trade deadline with him. Supposedly there's been some rumors going around, but I think Josh Jacobs is going to be the focal point of this offense. I think he did a really good job being able to maximize his leverage and getting a little bit more money before the season started. Yeah,
this is like leverage 101 for running backs right now. Is you have to hold out as long as you can. They're going to waive the fines, hopefully incentivize you to come back on the 1-year franchise tag.
He doesn't get fined because he was on the tag. So he
hasn't signed it. He hasn't signed it. Yeah. But either way, like this is what you do. This is the only leverage you have. Is you like Chris Jones, for example, is in this situation, right? Like the only thing you could do is sit away from the team and basically say, pay me more. Like do something to make me come back for at least this year if you think I'm not worth it. And that way you're not going to be foregoing, what you are structured to be paid. I mean, we've seen that not really work out before with Le'Veon Bell. It's really unfortunate what's happened with the running back market, but it's just a byproduct of supply and demand. And there's such a great supply of, running backs that are just cheaper than what we're seeing right now. coming into the league and being able to do what the Isaiah Pacheco's and others who are younger have done right when they've stepped foot in the league. So it's harder to make a case of wanting to invest a ton of money in these guys, even though they do have a huge impact on the outcome of games.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's unfortunate. It stinks because running backs do matter, and you can make the case that, especially where that offense is sort of, we talk about the Eagles and the Colts, how they're operating, the Patriots, right? The Saints have been pretty run heavy. A little bit, we'll see what they do now, Derek Carr, but like under Sean Payton, they were even kind of run heavy, even with Drew Brees. There's a lot of teams who have loaded up the Colts. I expect the Panthers to be run heavy this year, and it's just tough. It's tough because if you're drafted even as a first-round pick late in the first round or even early in the first round, Saquon Barkley, your team's not going to give you this massive contract extension where they can just play it out, franchise tag you, pick up your fifth-year option, franchise tag you, and then keep going. And it's like you'd almost rather be a second-round pick. Well, I guess Jonathan Taylor proves that theory wrong, I suppose.
I was about to say.
It's mamas don't let your babies grow up to running backs. Is that where we're at?
Pretty much. Like try to help build them into a DN if you can.
Yeah.
There's a player in Notre Dame right now, Chris
Lamar
Tyree. He's converted to a slot receiver. Makes a lot of sense. He's done a really good job so far. So
don't build up your lower, get streamlined and just work on your pass catching. Because it's crazy. Like even Austin Eckler is just an unbelievable pass catching running back. It can run between the tackles, still just cannot get paid. What was your favorite kicker trade of the day?
I think Will Lutz to the Denver Broncos. For one, I was surprised the New Orleans Saints even parted ways with him. He's just done it at a high level for so many years. And we know Sean Payton has familiarity with him coming from the New Orleans Saints. But I was going to talk about this in the beginning of the show. Like, that kicker market is on fire right now. We got guys getting traded left and right, teams calling about kickers. And Brady, I was talking about this in the studio today. Like, that's the one position I would say besides quarterback that has the most pressure. Like, again, they're never with the team. They're always on the sideline. They're playing ping pong, Brady. But if you miss a kick, a game-winning kick, there's 52 other guys that want to strangle you, right? So, that's a high-pressure position. And you were talking about this earlier. Like, why would you draft a kicker? Just, get an undrafted free agent guy. Let them compete in training camp. Whoever wins, that's who you make as your kicker, because we saw Cade York get cut, and he was a draft pick. We've seen multiple kickers get cut as, third, fourth, fifth round draft picks. So the kicker market is strange, right? Because there's teams that don't even have kickers right now. There's teams calling about kickers. And then we saw 3 or 4 kickers get traded already.
Yep. Yeah. By the way, Will Lutz's agent. So Lutz lost his job in New Orleans to Blake Group. I am Group. See if I get that one. Yeah. Brady didn't get that. Brady didn't watch Guardians.
I am Groot.
He didn't lose his job. Lutz's agent.
What actor does that voice?
Oh crap! I would know this if you had asked.
You don't know the answer to this?
Is it The Rock?
No. He does a lot of race car movies. That's literally giving you the answer.
It's not race car. There's a lot of racing with cars.
Racing with cars. Okay.
How about this? My cousin was in one of these movies.
What?
Yes.
I'm too flustered. Just tell me, who's Iron Groot?
Tell him.
He looks like The Rock.
Kind of.
John Cena?
No.
Vin Diesel.
Oh, it is Vin Diesel. That's right. I knew it was somebody like that.
Come on, man.
Touche, Brady. Touche. He didn't lose his job. The Saints just made a poor decision. The better player is not the one who's left on the Saints roster. I'll tell you that. Brady, what was your favorite kicker trade today? Nick Folk to the Titans from the Patriots?
Yeah, no.
I like that trade.
No, I don't have one. Is that
they're like three in like 20 minutes.
No.
That's how players feel about kickers.
I don't have one. Yeah, I just let him sort of self out. I think that's
who's your least favorite kicker that you had on like a team in your time in the NFL?
Look, here's the thing: is you can't, as a quarterback, have a least favorite kicker because
I'll tell you who Peyton Manning's was Mike Vanderjagt, an idiot kicker.
Because as much as you want to say that, there's times they're going to be bailing you out, right? You got a 2-minute drive that doesn't get the end zone, or like you get the credit for a 2-minute drive when they're hitting a field goal,
banging down a 53-yarder.
Yeah, but it goes like game-winning drive, right? Fourth quarter comeback. Like it goes on your stat book too, even though like they're the ones sealing the ticks.
Even though you handed the ball off 4 times and somebody slapped down a 53-yarder and it's Brady Quinn game-winning drive.
I don't hate on it. I just know in some circumstances, like this stuff doesn't settle itself out like right this moment. It's going to take a little time, and even sometimes it happens throughout the course of the season. So
True.
Yeah, kickers fluctuate, man. A very interesting big name went on the PUP list. We will tell you who it is next after the break.
And how about this? Get ready for non-stop action that will have you saying, "You gotta be kidding!" Oh my, Canada! This could change things. What a play and what a finish! That's some pretty good football, eh? He's gone all the way to the house. It's the Canadian Football League next Sunday on CBS Sports Network.
Did you see my panic face as I realized what time it was because we had to get dudes out of here? So I'm going to give you 2 names who went on the PUP list. Which one interests you more, Kyler Murray or Von Miller, dudes?
I mean, I'm a defensive lineman. You know, it was Von Miller. We expected Kyler Murray most likely to be on the PUP list. I honestly don't think he even plays this year because say he's healthy around week 7, 8, or 9, and they're 1-8. Like, is he really going back out there now? Granted, he might, right? Because he wants to prove that he could be the guy and they can build around him. Because if they pick number 1 overall, most likely they're going to take Caleb Williams. But then what do you do with Kyler Murray's contract? But Von Miller to me makes more sense just because once he got hurt, I think it was like week 10, you saw a massive drop off as far as, you know, the Buffalo Bills creating havoc getting to the quarterback. Like nobody was even close to creating pressure once Von Miller got hurt. Greg Rousseau looked really good in the beginning of the year with Von Miller on the other side. But as soon as Von got hurt, Greg Rousseau disappeared. I mean, Ed Oliver got this big contract, hasn't really lived up to that first round billing yet as far as creating, you know, havoc and getting to the quarterback on a consistent basis. But yet they still paid him because they like him a lot. And if you look at some of the other D tackles that went with him, they constantly get to the quarterback. You look at Quinn and Williams. I mean, Nick Bosa was in that class. Josh Allen was in that class. Like there were some studs in that class. So he needs to take his game to the next level. I think they were kind of ready for this because they signed Leonard Floyd late, right before training camp. And he's a consistently really good edge player, right? He's a guy that gets around 8.5 sacks every single year, but he's not Von Miller, right? So it'll be interesting to see how the Buffalo Bills come out on defense because let's not forget, Leslie Frazier isn't there anymore. Sean McDermott's calling the defense now. That secondary is getting up there in age. Von Miller's up there in age. He's in his mid-30s. You know, Father Time is undefeated. We'll see how he bounces back, but I think this could loom large for the Bills in regards to how they play on defense because they've been known as a cover 2 defense that, you know, gets after it with their front 4, but they're multiple in the way that they disguise cover 2. Now with Sean McDermott coming into the fold and calling plays again, will he maybe add a little bit more pressure because they aren't able to get to the quarterback as good with 4? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out for the Buffalo Bills this year.
Bills also, by the way, traded Boogie Basham.
Which I thought was weird too with the Von injury.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I think it was expected for Kyler. I mean, interesting topics like, all right, Arizona, like just be any more blatant about you trying to collapse for Caleb at this point.
Collapse for Caleb is good.
I like that. I'm going to use
Josh
that.
Dobbs just got there, and all of a sudden he's your starter week 1.
And Clayton Toole's going to start.
John Game is like, I'm not revealing my week 1 starter for competitive reasons. It's like, what? You're competing for the first overall pick.
Yeah, welcome to every college football coach right now who had a quarterback battle that like
the or on the depth chart.
Good, yeah, they got that or heading into the week 1. I would actually say Von Miller for this standpoint. Some of what Leger talked about, like clearly your pass rush was different last year without him. It kind of got exposed, and they had 2 divisional games in their first 4. And I think this division is going to be really tight. I've already said I'm really bullish on the Jets. That's who you kick off the season with. So, like, if you're Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, you have to deal with Von Miller. Sweet. Yeah. If you're Tua in week 4, you don't have to deal with Von Miller. Sweet. Like, that gives you that extra advantage of, all right, like, if they do take a step back this year, maybe it's because they didn't have a little extra juice off of the edge. And so I think it's really concerning from that standpoint, given the offseason with, Leslie Frazier no longer being there, what we saw last year. And just the fact that you got, 2 of your 6 divisional games in that span, you're not going to have arguably one of your best defensive players, a future Hall of Famer.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say the one thing I do think the Bills want to have happen is they don't want to run the risk of playing Von Miller too much early and him not being healthy. They want him healthy for the final stretch run. But yeah, you're right. I mean, those 2 divisional games are going to matter and ultimately could impact the seeding in the AFC. All right, that's going to do it for us. Make sure and like, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts on YouTube. For Douche, for BQ, I'm Brinson. We'll see you guys later.